in any situation, when you are faced with deciding how you're going to look at something, you have to ask yourself, which one brings you closer to God? And do you feel good when you think of life as just ends the moment your heart stops beating? Does that bring you comfort and peace? Does that bring you closer to God? Or do you feel good when you think about the idea or the knowing that we have that the soul goes on to experience far more than we can pick up on right now when we're limited to this body? It's like, which one brings you closer to where you want to be and to how you want to feel? Pick that one. We don't know for sure either one is real. So just pick the one that makes you feel good. Because why would you choose to fill your mind with things that take you away from peace? I can't imagine.
And your dad, I think you write about this in the book where he says, you have a choice. You can stay in grief, but I always encourage people to get over it sooner. I'm not articulating it correctly.
Yeah. No, it actually, that was something I wrote about because I remember I was in the shower and it was a few days after my dad had recently passed away, and I was still very much in the grief of it and very stuck and overwhelmed with emotion. And when I would find myself in those overwhelming moments, I would have this instinct, call Dad, and then I would say to myself, you're never going to do that again. And then the grief would hit you again, all the never agains, all the should haves, all the if only. I had just been with him 48 hours before. If only this heart attack had happened in Australia, where he insisted we had conjoined rooms, so we would have been in the same room. Something could have been done, but so I kept doing that. And then there was this time in the shower where it happened again. I thought, call Dad. And then I said, I'm never going to do that again. And the grief came over me. And I said, okay, Sage, you can't keep doing this to yourself. It's torture. You're torturing yourself. You've got to find a better way to think about this. And so I said, okay, I don't have my dad here to call. However, I have a lifetime of knowing him and knowing and hearing his wisdom and hearing him talk to other people who were struggling or suffering. And so I said, what would Dad say to me now? What would he say to me? And what sort of came to me, which to me at the time felt very out of nowhere. I didn't feel in any place to have profound thoughts, and it was this idea that I can make this the worst thing that ever happened to me, or that I can choose to see it as an opportunity to grow and to get closer to him, to get closer to faith, to believing, to knowing that he's still with me. And then I could hear it in his voice, him telling me, remember the Choose Sooner story. And the Choose Sooner story is, it's a story about a man who his son was at war in battle, and he got a knock on his door one day, and it was somebody there to tell him that his son had died in battle. And that night, the man went into the town and he went dancing at a party. And there was a woman there, and all the neighbors were talking, saying, what's going on? Everybody knew what had happened. So a woman went up to him and said, I don't understand. You just learned that your son passed away just this morning. How could you be out here dancing? And his answer was, sooner or later, I'm going to have to move on from this, or it will kill me. It will be the end of me. And I'm just choosing sooner. And I remembered that story and I thought, I can choose sooner. There's no set amount of time that I have to grieve through this, or that I have to be sad or stuck. It's okay to be happy too. And that's not to say that grieving and feeling the sadness and having those emotions, that's completely healthy and normal, and you should do that. But it's also okay to have times, and big times, whole days, weeks, whatever it is for you, that you feel happy. And that's okay. It's okay to choose sooner. There's no schedule that you have to, because for me, I had school starting in a few days. I was in graduate school, and the semester was starting just a few days later. And I thought, I was like, should I even go? I felt like I could, but then I was like, well, people judge me for, just moving on so quickly, going to school 3 days later. I mean, it just felt too soon. And I did take 2 weeks off, but ultimately I went back, and it was the right choice for me. And remembering that sort of gave me permission, like, no, I don't have to be stuck. I don't have to stay. I can choose, and it will be okay. I can be moving on and also still grieving, and it's all perfect. So I remember, and it applies to anything too. You lose your job, you can choose to be okay with it sooner,
I love that so much. I feel like that can, yes, apply to anything. And I think, unless I imagined it, didn't your dad somehow tell you that he can connect with you better if you're in the playful, fun energy that he is over on the other side, which makes it resonated so deeply with me because, usually when people are grieving, they're just like so angry that this person left, or was taken from them too early, and they're sad and they're grieving, which is again, totally natural. But then these connections come, if you can understand that the connection comes when you're in that loving, joyful, playful, kingdom of heaven. And as a child, that's when the people on the other side can more easily connect with you. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that was something that he had sent us a DVD, and it was the Christmas before he passed away. So it was like 9 months before he passed away. And he had sent each of us a DVD of him speaking with Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham. And he said, if you want any money from me for Christmas, watch this and send back to me a letter of what impacted you the most. So each of us obviously did that because we wanted some, Christmas money. And I remember when I watched the DVD, I remember the part that stuck out to me the most, what I wrote my letter to him about, was Esther Hicks describing how when she lost her husband, how as a medium, as a channelist, really, she wasn't able to connect with him, and she couldn't find him. She couldn't feel her husband's energy, which was particularly alarming for her because she's gifted in that way. And it was through a series of events that took place where she was basically reminded that she had this she was in grief, but she was also in fear. Fear because she couldn't find him, she couldn't feel him. And she had this really low energy that she was like, I guess, vibrating at. And it was a energy of fear. And she was reminded somehow, I think it was through Abraham, who she channels, she was reminded that in order to bring in anything into your life, you have to be in alignment with it in order to experience it. And that where Jerry, her husband, was now was in the energy of just love and joy and peace and all of the high frequency energies that we know exist. And she was reminded by her spirit guides, essentially, that in order to feel him, in order to communicate with him, she needed to bring herself up to where he was. And then she would get the messages, and she did. And she was able to find him immediately. So I wrote this letter to my dad about that. And the day he died, I remember when I finally got home and I was alone for the first time after getting the call and being on the phone when his assistant Dee found him, and just really traumatic. And then having to call Sage, and just so much at once, so much in one day. I hadn't even cried yet. I was still in this place where I was like negotiating somehow with God that this wasn't real and this didn't actually happen. I definitely was not processing it. When I got home and I was alone, I remember the thing that just kept going through my mind was, I can't believe you pulled it off, which seems like a really weird thing to think. But for me, it was because, and Sage could tell you as well, he always talked about death as though it was something that he looked forward to, as something to celebrate. In fact, I know that Anita, and Anita Morjani was asked a question in Maui at a conference that she was doing with my dad, and I was in the audience, and somebody asked her, my mom didn't win the battle with cancer. She fought really hard, but she lost in the end. And that it was really hard for the daughter to find any peace in that because the mother really wanted to live. She really wanted to fight, and she did, but she still lost the battle in the end. And Anita said, your mother didn't lose anything. It's just the way you're looking at it that makes you think that she lost something. But what she gained, where she is, as humans, we don't have the experience or the knowledge to know how good it is, how great it feels. But now that your mother's there, Anita said, I envy her. I want to be there. It's so beautiful. And I remember thinking that and having this feeling of, I can't believe you finally did it. I was like mad, like, you asshole, you actually died and left us behind. But I thought about the Esther thing and I started to laugh. And then I got a really cool sign from him that I talk about in the book. And that was really the beginning, I think, for me, that I had this knowing that I had to stay connected to my high flying disc, as Esther Hicks calls it, in order to find him or feel him. And when I would do that, which it was not all the time, but when I would, it would happen.
Yeah. And I feel like you're, just to add a little bit to that, I don't have a whole long thing, but our dad used to talk about too, it's like energetically, you talked about this in your documentary, Heal, as well. Energetically, when particles come together to form something solid, they have to be slowed way down to come into, the human form, solid form, a book, whatever it is. But when particles are loose and out in the atmosphere, they're spinning so much faster. So our dad used to talk about how when you leave the physical, you're no longer limited by these physical bodies, because really they are so limited. I mean, we've got 5 senses, we perceive our whole experience through them. But we know there's so much more out there than that. I mean, just at this very moment, there's AM and FM radio waves coursing through the room that I'm sitting in, and I'm not a radio, so I can't feel them. I don't have an antenna. I think I'm sitting still, but in reality, we're sitting on a planet that's rotating and hurling through space and multiple different axes and on and on. So, we know that these bodies, they deceive us. And when we leave them, I think we really can know that for the first time without questioning it. And yeah, I mean, like Serena said, our dad constantly talked about how it's just the next great adventure. It's the next phase. Our mom too, she still talks. I get mad at her, but I'm like, you're not going anywhere. Okay. But she talks about how, she looks forward to that one day, and she looks forward to messing with us and giving us signs like how our dad does constantly, that we're always group texting about what happened today. And
Thank you for listening to the Heal podcast. Be sure to tune in for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. Oh, and make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And if you feel inspired, we would love you to rate and review us so that we have the opportunity to reach more people. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram for some behind the scenes fun and more inspiration at @Heal Documentary and @Kelly Goris. Thank you so much, and be well.